The gardens of Kensington Palace were in full Baroque splendor on this crisp autumn afternoon. Bright shafts of golden sunlight filtered through the fiery canopies of changing leaves, casting a warmly kaleidoscopic glow across the immaculate lawns and flowering hedgerows. In one secluded alcove, the tranquil sounds of a bubbling stone fountain provided a serene backdrop as two figures strolled its perimeter in hushed conversation. Princess Beatrice was instantly recognizable with her tumble of strawberry blonde hair and that distinctive poise inherited from her mother Sarah, the Duchess of York. Walking beside her with a slightly befuddled air was her cousin Harry, Duke of Sussex. His brow was tightly furrowed as he listened intently to Beatrice, seeming almost pained by whatever she was telling him. "I realize this all sounds rather far-fetched and more than a bit scheming, darling," Beatrice was saying in a measured tone as she reached out to give Harry's arm a consoling pat. "But you know I wouldn't dream of bringing you misleading gossip, especially about Meghan." Harry sighed heavily, raking a hand through his perpetually tousled ginger locks in a rare show of agitation. "No, no. Of course I trust your judgment completely, B," he assured her with the faintest hint of weariness bleeding into his words. "It's just, well, it's simply hard for me to square what you're suggesting with the woman I've come to know and love so deeply, you understand?" "I know, and that's precisely why I felt I had to make you aware," Beatrice replied, pausing in their stroll and turning to face Harry directly with an earnest look. "We may be family and share certain unbreakable bonds. But there's also an unavoidable history of, well, complexity between the two of us. If anyone would be disillusioned enough to hatch some sort of underhanded plot, it would sadly be her." Harry opened his mouth to protest but seemed to think better of it, instead simply nodding for Beatrice to continue uninterrupted. "Look, you know how disastrously things played out between her and my father," she pressed on delicately. "Charles hasn't even attempted to mask his disdain and distrust towards Meghan ever since those ridiculous Oprah interviews where she lobbed all manner of hurtful insinuations at the crown." A muscle twitched in Harry's clenched jaw, and she could sense his deep-rooted defensiveness being poked at. But still he remained silent, listening. "So when Daddy decided to disinherit Meghan from any future claims or disbursements, well, I don't think it's any stretch to imagine she may have taken it rather harder than her perfect public face let on." At this, Harry's brows knit in skepticism. "You can't possibly expect me to believe Meghan was aiming to lay claim to the king's entire inheritance? We're talking about the British monarchy, not some windfall for her personal enrichment. It simply doesn't track, B." "Not the entire inheritance, you dozy plonker," she shot back with surprising bluntness. "Everyone knows the bulk automatically transfers to William and his line after Charles. But there's also the not insignificant matter of your own personal trust funds that are set to fully mature when you turn 40 next year." A heavy silence fell between them as Harry's expression slowly morphed into one of guarded disbelief. "B, what are you saying?" His voice was barely above a hoarse rasp. "You can't possibly think Meghan would ever." Beatrice's gaze was equal parts sympathetic and resolute as she pressed on with the ugly truth. "That $500 million windfall you're set to receive on your birthday? Word around the family is she's been steadily plotting a way to divert the lot of it into her control and far away from the royal coffers. Some sort of nefarious long con she's been keeping completely under wraps until the perfect moment." Shock and hurt flitted across Harry's face in rapid succession. That's just completely mental. Meghan's many things, but she isn't a scheming criminal out to steal my bloody inheritance." He wheeled away from Beatrice, dragging both hands through his hair as he wrestled with the profoundly troubling notion she'd planted in his head. "Look, I realize this isn't easy to accept," Beatrice said, keeping her voice softly measured as she watched Harry struggling to regain his composure. "The truth so rarely is, especially when it involves the people closest to us. But you need to brace yourself for the possibility that her intentions towards you and the family aren't nearly as innocent or benign as she's led you to believe." Harry whirled back to face his cousin with an inscrutable look. "You say the family is certain about this? What proof could any of you possibly have?" Beatrice paused, debating how much to reveal. "There were certain communications that leaked to us after Oprah." Text messages and emails between her and her inner circle of confidants discussing potential strategies to secure future revenue streams once you secured your majority share of the inheritance. A look of stunned bewilderment washed over Harry's face as he absorbed the reality that his own wife had apparently been plotting financial betrayal on such a grand scale right under his nose. "Oh Harry, you have to know none of us take any pleasure in something like this coming to light," Beatrice said, voice brimming with compassion and concern. "We held out hope she'd have a change of heart once you repatriated and made amends with the family. But it's become clear Meghan's true motives were always mercenary and self-serving from the start." She approached Harry, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder as he appeared to wilt slightly under the weight of his disillusionment. "We're here for you, through whatever you need. Just, don't let the witch take you for everything like she's been scheming to do." For a long stretch, the only sounds came from the gurgling fountain as Harry absorbed the gut-wrenching betrayal his wife stood accused of orchestrating against him and their adopted family. Beatrice's heart ached watching him visibly wrestle with the prospect of it all being true. Finally, he seemed to settle himself with a bone-deep sigh of resignation. "Show me," he muttered in a leaden tone. "Show me what you have that proves Meghan was plotting this all along." Beatrice nodded solemnly, giving his shoulder one last consoling squeeze before turning to lead them back towards Kensington Palace's inner halls. She could only pray Harry possessed enough courage to stare into the abyss his wife had apparently created for them both, and emerge stronger on the other side, free of Meghan's malignant influence once and for all. As they strode away, neither was aware of the solitary figure tucked behind a copse of greenery and shrubbery not far away. There stood Meghan, her expression one of thinly veiled fury and wounded pride. So her wicked scheming with those emails had been uncovered at last, she mused bitterly as she watched her hapless husband being led off like a lamb to slaughter by the family she'd never managed to win over. Well, if those stuffed shirts wished to recast her as the villain, she would play the part with magnificent commitment. Only this time, she wouldn't be leaving anything up to chance once she had control of Harry's wealth. No more Mrs. Nice Duchess for them whatsoever. Smoothing her features back into an inscrutable mask, Meghan retreated silently back towards the palace's side entrance from which she'd slipped away earlier. She would have to accelerate her plans for securing the inheritance now that the royals were onto her schemes. No matter. She was more than prepared to fight to the bitter end for every last stolen penny her dear husband was owed. Even if she had to utterly destroy the world he'd been foolishly loyal to all his life in the process.